Last month, we revisited some cool British singles released in February 1968. Let's see what March has to offer. Let's begin.
Lady Madonna, children at your feet, wonder how you managed to make ends meet.
March 1968 saw the release of this single by the Beatles. One of the most frequently discussed topics in the press during the first half of 1968 was a 50s rock and roll revival that the press believed was going to take the music scene by storm. And Lady Madonna, which certainly owed a lot to the 50s sounds of artists such as Fats Domino, was understood by the press as the definitive proof that this 50s rock and roll revival was really happening. Several parts of the song were actually lifted from Bad Penny Blues by Humphrey Lyttelton, a song which became a top 20 hit in Britain in 1956. Lady Madonna was released when the Beatles were in India with the Maharishi. Ringo Starr, however, who returned from India before the rest of the Beatles, spoke about the song to the press just a week after the single was released. Ringo said, "What Paul is doing on piano is a sort of Bad Penny Blues." We asked George Martin, how did they do it on Bad Penny Blues? And he said that they used brushes, so I used brushes and we did a track with just brushes and the piano. And then, Paul decided to sing it in his sort of Elvis voice. I must admit that we must have had the thought at the back of our minds that rock and roll is on the way back, or it wouldn't be quite so rock influenced. The single was well received by the press, but the reviews were not as enthusiastic as the single reviews from the previous year. And many fans sent letters to the British press accusing the Beatles of jumping on the 50s revival bandwagon, and lamenting the fact that they had abandoned the more progressive and experimental path they had taken in 1967. The B-side, however, was a George Harrison composition that was definitely more akin to their more experimental material from 1967.
Less one really knows.
Despite the controversy, Lady Madonna topped the British chart for 2 weeks, and the single was a hit all over Europe. In the States, the single peaked at number 4 according to Billboard.
My father's name was Dad, my mother's name was Mom.
Due to its appearance on multiple compilations, this single by a group called The Fire has become a major cult favorite over the years. The single seemed destined to become a hit, but it was eventually a commercial failure, and its commercial failure was probably due to Paul McCartney. When Paul McCartney came back from India, the single was starting to get a lot of airplay on the radio. Paul heard the song on the radio and was very impressed, but he felt the track needed more harmony vocals and additional guitars. So McCartney convinced Decca Records to pull the single, and he got the group to record a harmony vocal and an additional guitar. The label reissued the single as a collaboration between Decca Records and Apple Music. But by the time the single was released again, the radio no longer cared about the song. And as a result, the single completely bombed. Honestly, the original single-track vocal version was infinitely better than the later version featuring McCartney's ideas.
From a kid of 4, you don't expect supernatural intellect. From a kid of 4, you don't expect the supernatural intellect.
Thankfully, many of the compilations including this excellent single feature the vastly superior original version.
She's a black magic woman and she's trying to get the devil out of me.
Black Magic Woman is one of the most popular songs from the early lineup of Fleetwood Mac, when Peter Green was still the leader of the band. Disc jockey John Peel reviewed the song for the Melody Maker. Peel said,
"I'm glad Peter Green's LP is doing well, and it's great to release a single because it gives me the opportunity to play him. But sales-wise, it won't mean much. Peter has one of the best 5 groups in the country along with Pink Floyd, The Nice, and John Mayall's Blues Breakers. Their music is very exciting, and they were doing rock and roll before the revival, which I think it's a bit of a drag incidentally because you can't recapture an era. I was so shocked and disillusioned by Lady Madonna by the Beatles. I could live without hearing it again, whereas I have to hear I Am the Walrus regularly, otherwise I have withdrawal pains."
Despite the quality of the song, Black Magic Woman stalled at number 37 in Britain and didn't even manage to enter the charts in the States. A couple of years later, however, Santana covered the song and took it to number 4 in America.
Perhaps the sun will never shine upon my field of weeds.
Due to the massive success of A Whiter Shade of Pale, which was Procol Harum's debut single, their following 45s were always overshadowed by their early hit, and the band never managed to recapture the success of their debut single. Quite rightly so, was Procol Harum's third single. Record Mirror wrote,
"This is the group's third single, and it sounds dead right to me to create the hat trick of biggies. Great moody sounds, yet everything crystal clear with fine organ sounds, and as ever, a song that is really worth singing and hearing. Distinctive about sums it up. I like it a lot."
Despite the success of the group's first two singles, the song only managed to reach number 50. Kurt Cobain and company were not the first band to call themselves Nirvana.
Travels on a cloud, he's one of the good time people now.
The group had a knack for excellent melancholic melodies, and a sound that blended baroque pop and psychedelia, and their first two albums are essential. Rainbow Chaser was Nirvana's third single, and a big favorite among fans of the band. Disc magazine journalist Penny Valentine wrote,
"It's a strange thing about this record. First, when I put it on, I was rather disappointed because I thought the group I have loved in the past had suddenly made great concessions to commercialism in their approach. Then I listened again to the phasing and odd brass and weird magic sounds and thought that it wasn't commercial at all. Then, the day after, I heard it on the radio and thought it stood a very good chance of being a hit, especially with those little chorus voices picking up the end of verses. So we shall see."
Rainbow Chaser reached number 34 in Britain, and remained in the top 40 for 4 weeks, becoming the band's most commercially successful single.
We will drink from Galvin, cups so very old.
Who can dance the time? Just busted up one time.
Most people only remember the songs that Spencer Davis and company recorded with Stevie Winwood on vocals, but the group released several great singles and a couple of really good albums after Winwood's departure.
Watch now, carefully follow me.
We will be there after.
This single from March 1968 was the group's third release after Winwood's departure, and it was yet another quality single that sadly went pretty much unnoticed. Chris Welch from The Melody Maker wrote,
An explosive sound, but a strong enough melody for everybody to retain in their memory cells. Dancer is determined to produce advanced quality pop. Everybody said that his first with the new group, Time Seller, should have been a hit. And the following single, Mr. Second Class, was better than most of the dross currently littering the chart. Let's hope this stirring performance is strong enough to tempt the public palate.
The single didn't chart. Spencer Davis also produced and co-wrote this excellent single by Nite People. This is undoubtedly the best single the group ever recorded, and one of the highlights of March 1968. The record enjoyed extensive radio plays and an appearance by the band on the television show Time for Blackburn. But the extra publicity failed to propel the record up the charts, and the British press seemed to think that the single sounded outdated. Record Mirror wrote,
An okay sort of sound. But again, the material isn't right. Organ boosts the backing and the harmonies are quite clever.
Spencer Davis and company recorded their own version of the song a few months later. Their version of the song was included on the group's fourth album, the first to be released after the departure of Stevie Winwood.
There he stands in shades of orange light to chase away the evils of the night.
The End were one of many British bands who moved abroad in order to escape the massive competition that existed in Britain. In this case, the group moved to Spain and enjoyed moderate success in clubs around the Madrid area. The band was discovered by Stones bassist Bill Wyman, who became their manager and producer. After releasing 4 singles in Spain without much success, Shades of Orange was their first single with Decca Records. Both sides of the single were great examples of British psychedelia at its best. The A-side, Shades of Orange, featured Stones drummer Charlie Watts on tablas, and a marvelous production by Bill Wyman, who was assisted by sound engineer Glyn Johns. The B-side was another excellent tune called Loving Sacred Loving. Record Mirror wrote,
Bill Wyman produced this sometimes weird single, and the group actually achieve a great deal in terms of imagination, drive and power. It could take off.
Both sides of the single were eventually included on the group's debut album, which is essential listening to anyone who loves British psychedelia from the 60s. Unfortunately, due to the Rolling Stones' struggles with Alan Klein, the album wasn't released until 1969. And at that point, their music was already deemed outdated, and even the group itself had already lost interest. The End broke up shortly after the release of the album, and changed their name to Tucky Buzzard. After the success of Pictures of Matchstick Men in early 1968, Status Quo released their second single in March. The song was fairly similar to their debut single, and that's probably one of the reasons why the single flopped. Another reason for its commercial failure is that the BBC boycotted the single when the group's manager Pat Barlow announced that they would be protesting at 10 Downing Street about the close down of Radio Caroline, which they acknowledged had made their debut single a hit in January. Penny Valentine wrote,
I was rather surprised that Matchstick Men did so well, but there it did. And on the strength of that, I should think that this should do very well indeed. It reminds me of a lot of things. It's sort of Vanilla Fudge crossed with Hey Joe. A very interesting intro that it picked up again as a middle break. At times, the actual record becomes a bit messy, but I think that overall it sounds like a hit.
Despite Penny Valentine's prediction, the single failed to chart. Another psychedelic highlight from March 1968 was this song by a band called Ice. This is yet another single from 1968 which became a cult favorite years later, mostly due to its appearance on several compilations of obscure psychedelia from the 60s.
Ice cream breeds confusion in the younger set.
Record Mirror wrote,
Nicely done, but somehow missing on that directness that might click. But this group has distinct promise.
The B-side was another good tune. The single failed to chart.
Now I know I can't let Maggie go.
One of the best pop songs from March 1968 was this track by Honeybus. Penny Valentine wrote,
I like this group. I liked their first record, Do I Still Figure in Your Life? And I like this equally and think it probably stands more of a chance in the chart. Let's hope so, because they are consistently turning out pretty records with close, warm, loving voices. Parts reminded me of David and Jonathan. And there's a very catchy melody line on a sad little love song about how marvelous this girl is, which makes a nice change. Some lovely woodwind hopping in and out as well. Play it.
The single became a huge hit. It reached number 8 in Britain and remained in the charts for over 2 months. And the song also became a top 10 hit in Ireland, Holland, and New Zealand.
William Joker's time machine. William Joker's Hyderabad. A fantastic time machine.
This song by a band called Lemon Tree was written by the Moves bassist Ace Kefford, and the single was produced by the Moves guitarist Trevor Burton and the lead singer from Amen Corner. Record Mirror wrote,
A lot happening on this one. Trevor Burton of The Move and Andy Fairweather Low of Amen Corner joined forces on the production. It's a determined sort of beater with a clipped rhythm, and it really has a chart-worthy sound to it, although one can't be too enthusiastic over something from a new group. Lovely use of brass.
Just like many other singles from that period, the song has been featured on several compilations over the years, but it was a commercial failure when it was originally released.
I love Jennifer Eccles. I know that she loves me.
According to Graham Nash himself, this single is the main reason why he decided to leave the Hollies. Graham Nash wanted the Hollies to follow a more experimental and psychedelic direction, but the rest of the band preferred to follow a more straightforward pop direction. And the relative lack of success of their previous single, King Midas in Reverse, which was the most experimental single they ever issued, forced Graham Nash to forget about the more challenging material he had in mind, and follow the straightforward pop direction that the rest of the band preferred. Nash was so disappointed about the commercial nature of the single that he left the Hollies shortly after. The single, however, was a huge success. It reached number 7 in Britain and remained in the top 40 for 10 weeks.
Flossie Phillip, she has just been born. So was Hector and friendly Percy Pong.
Another psychedelic single that has become a cult favorite over the years is this single by a band called Turquoise.
It's very sad that they should spare.
The B-side has been featured on many compilations, and this was the track that opened the well-known first volume of the British psychedelic trip series, released in the 1980s on the C for Miles label. The group was formed in Muswell Hill in 1967, and their music was very influenced by the Kinks. In fact, the group even name-checked Dave and Ray Davies at the end of the song. The record went pretty much unnoticed, but this 45 has become a really expensive collector's item. A copy of the single was recently sold on eBay for over £500.
She took my hand and led me down to Everglades where lemon trees they blossom on the ground.
This B-side by a duo called Sundragon was an excellent song which seemed to merge psychedelia with baroque pop, and the track featured a stunning lineup of musicians featuring future Deep Purple members John Lord on keyboards, Ritchie Blackmore on guitar, and Ian Pace on drums. Sundragon featured Rob Freeman and Ian McClintock, who had previously been members of a band called Sands. Sands were managed by Brian Epstein, and the group released a couple of excellent singles in 1967. But the band fell apart when Epstein died in August of that year. After the breakup of the band, Rob Freeman and Ian McClintock formed this duo called Sundragon, and they managed to score a minor hit in Britain with a cover of Green Tambourine by American band The Lemon Pipers. This single from March 1968 was their second release, and despite the success of the debut single, this 45 was a commercial failure, and the duo broke up shortly after.
Colour Sergeant Lily White, coming home on leave. Little children run to him, tugging on his sleeve.
Here's yet another psychedelic single that has become a cult favorite over the years.
Colour Sergeant Lily White, Colour Sergeant Lily White.
This track by a band called West Coast Consortium went pretty much unnoticed at the time, and the press didn't even bother to review the single. But both sides of this 45 were rediscovered years later due to its appearance on multiple compilations of rare psychedelic singles. The B-side was another good song.
She didn't listen to the things they say. She didn't wait to hear their plea.
The single didn't chart. I hope you enjoyed this trip back to March 1968. See you next time.